The Voynich Manuscript is dated back to around 1404 to 1434. Handwritten, nobody could decode it.
What if the book that defied every expert for 6 centuries is finally cracking? Not by human hands, but by something we built? What if pages once dismissed as nonsense are starting to whisper back, not with clarity, but with unsettling implications? Could a machine uncover knowledge that was hidden on purpose? And for good reason? As artificial intelligence edges closer to unlocking the Voynich Manuscript, we have to ask, are we ready for what's inside? Because one decoded sentence could shift the entire meaning, and not necessarily in a way we'll want. If the manuscript starts speaking, will we regret listening? The book that refused to speak. For over 6 centuries, the Voynich Manuscript has resisted every attempt to unlock its secrets. Carbon dated to the early 14th century, this cryptic codex is widely considered one of history's most mysterious books. Written in an unknown script and language that no one has ever conclusively identified, it has drawn attention from scholars, linguists, code breakers, and even conspiracy theorists. Despite countless attempts over the past 100 years, no human has successfully deciphered more than a few fragments of the text, none with universal agreement. It's not just unreadable, it's unrelenting. The more people tried to understand it, the deeper the mystery became. What makes the Voynich Manuscript so captivating is not just its strangeness, but its resilience against human logic and linguistic science. From seasoned cryptographers in both world wars to language specialists fluent in obscure medieval dialects, the manuscript has humbled generations. Theories have ranged from practical, like the idea it's a coded herbal guide, to the speculative, including rumors of extraterrestrial origin or that it's an elaborate hoax. Yet, no matter the angle of attack, the result was the same: confusion, controversy, and ultimately, failure. The manuscript became a kind of intellectual graveyard, where even the sharpest minds walked away empty-handed. But now, something has shifted. After years of stalled progress, a new kind of mind is approaching the manuscript. Not a human one, but artificial intelligence. Unlike humans, AI doesn't get discouraged or distracted. It doesn't fall in love with theories. Instead, it deals in patterns, probability, and massive data processing. And it appears that's exactly what was needed. In recent years, machine learning and natural language processing tools have begun to reveal patterns and linguistic structures within the manuscript that weren't detectable to the human eye. The long-standing silence of the Voynich may finally be breaking, not because we grew smarter, but because we built something that could outthink us in a specific way. This development raises new questions. Was the manuscript always decodable, but just beyond human reach? Or is it possible that AI is seeing things that aren't really there, finding order in noise, because it's programmed to? Still, the fact remains. Where humans have failed for centuries, machines are now making real progress. As one researcher noted, it took a machine to hear what humans couldn't. Whether that's a breakthrough or a new kind of danger remains to be seen. So before we ask what the manuscript says, maybe we need to ask something simpler. What exactly are we even looking at? What the manuscript looks like. Physically, the Voynich Manuscript is unremarkable. 240 pages of parchment bound in a small codex roughly the size of a modern paperback. But what's on those pages has left generations of researchers baffled. The text is written in a script now referred to as Voyniches, a completely unknown alphabet that does not match any known writing system. The characters appear to be written in a flowing, consistent hand, suggesting fluency and intentionality. Whoever wrote it was not improvising. Despite its elegant script, the writing cannot be directly linked to any real-world language, which only deepens the mystery of its purpose and origin. The illustrations are just as cryptic as the text, if not more so. Across the manuscript sections, the imagery includes detailed botanical drawings of plants that do not match any known species, astronomical and astrological charts with strange arrangements of stars and symbols, and one of the most confounding features, numerous drawings of nude women immersed in what appear to be green, murky pools. These figures are sometimes connected by tubes or held in container-like structures, leading to speculation about biological or alchemical processes. The visual style is medieval, but the themes remain difficult to categorize, too symbolic for pure science, too structured for random doodling. Most researchers divide the manuscript into 5 thematic sections based on the content of the drawings: botanical, astronomical, biological, pharmaceutical, and what's often called the recipes section. The botanical section is filled with large plant diagrams, some resembling familiar herbs, while others are unidentifiable or appear to be hybrids. The astronomical pages contain zodiac signs like Pisces and Sagittarius, paired with star maps that defy easy interpretation. The biological section, where those interconnected women appear, is the most unsettling, suggesting some kind of medical or reproductive focus, though without clear explanation. The pharmaceutical pages show containers and plant parts, and the final section seems to list short blocks of text, potentially recipes or instructions. Looking at the manuscript as a whole, it feels like the work of someone, or a group, deeply invested in cataloging specialized knowledge, but choosing to hide it behind layers of obfuscation. Some speculate it's an alchemist's notebook. Others suggest it was a physician's manual. Whatever its purpose, its layout and structure show careful planning. It wasn't thrown together randomly. If anything, it resembles a coded reference book, suggesting that while the ideas inside may have been practical, their concealment was deliberate. What were they trying to preserve, and from whom? Decades of dead ends. For over a century, the Voynich Manuscript has challenged some of the most accomplished minds in linguistics, cryptography, and medieval history, only to leave them empty-handed. After its modern rediscovery in 1912, it quickly attracted attention from scholars eager to crack what looked like an ancient code. Early 20th century cryptanalysts, including experts from World War I and World War II, applied statistical methods and frequency analysis, convinced it was an encrypted message. But despite their advanced skills, many honed during real wartime code-breaking, none of them could identify a clear system or linguistic origin. The manuscript refused to yield even basic patterns that would suggest a known language or cipher method. One of the most notable efforts came from William and Elizabeth Friedman, a legendary code-breaking couple whose work helped the Allies decrypt enemy communications during World War II. Despite years spent analyzing the manuscript's structure, they ultimately concluded it followed the logic of a real language, but without knowing which language, or even if it still existed, there was no way forward. Other government and military cryptographers tried their hand, especially during the Cold War era, when code-breaking expertise surged. Yet, even with the help of early computing tools, they made no real progress. These failures weren't for lack of effort. They were a testament to the manuscript's unique construction and the depth of its obscurity. In the decades that followed, academic researchers and amateur sleuths put forward a variety of theories. Some believed the manuscript was written by the English monk Roger Bacon using a now-lost cipher. Others proposed it was a form of shorthand, vowelless Ukrainian, or even constructed nonsense meant to imitate real language. One of the more persistent theories claimed the book was an elaborate hoax, possibly by Wilfrid Voynich himself, or a Renaissance-era forger. But carbon dating and ink analysis eventually debunked that idea, confirming its origins in the early 15th century. Still, the manuscript's resistance to translation led many to wonder if it was simply gibberish in a convincing disguise. What makes the Voynich manuscript particularly humbling is how consistently it has defeated even the best-equipped minds. Every wave of new technology or linguistic insight seemed to bring renewed hope, only to hit the same wall. Some of the most experienced code breakers in history walked away from it, acknowledging they were completely stumped. The manuscript earned a reputation not just as a mystery, but as a professional failure for anyone who dared to solve it. Until now, that is, because the next challenger wasn't a person. It was artificial intelligence. Despite countless man-hours poured into deciphering its pages, the Voynich Manuscript became a cautionary tale among scholars, a project that promised glory but delivered only frustration. Entire academic careers have passed with nothing more than educated guesses and stalled hypotheses. Linguists tried mapping Voynichese to every known language family. Mathematicians dissected the structure for cipher patterns. Even neurologists speculated whether it was a product of disordered thinking. Each approach brought a different lens, yet all arrived at the same conclusion. The manuscript didn't behave like any known system. It mimicked logic without revealing it, like a code deliberately engineered to mislead. Some researchers began to question whether the problem wasn't the method, but the assumptions behind it. Was it meant to be read at all? Or was it designed as a symbolic artifact, with meaning embedded in images, repetition, and rhythm, rather than in words? This line of thinking veered from traditional cryptanalysis into the realm of semiotics and anthropology. Still, even alternative interpretations ran aground without textual anchors. The manuscript stood unmoved, a centuries-old enigma immune to the full spectrum of human intellect. The arrival of AI didn't just represent a new tool, it marked a shift in how we confront the unknown, not through intuition or experience, but by surrendering the problem to something that doesn't think like us at all. A digital brain versus a medieval mind. For over a century, the Voynich Manuscript stood as a linguistic fortress, one that no human could breach. That changed when artificial intelligence entered the picture. At the University of Alberta, Professor Greg Kondrak and his graduate student Bradley Hauer applied machine learning and natural language processing, NLP, to the mystery. Their goal was simple: treat the manuscript script as a language that could be compared systematically against others. Using algorithms designed to detect structural similarities in syntax and vocabulary, they ran comparisons against over 380 modern and historical languages. What the AI found surprised even them. The AI concluded that the manuscript most closely aligned with Hebrew, an unexpected result, given that many human researchers had long assumed the text might be based on Latin or a now-lost language. More than 80% of the decoded words had matches in a Hebrew dictionary. This wasn't a loose correlation. The matches were consistent enough to suggest a real structure beneath the apparent randomness of the script. Still, Kondrak and Hauer were careful not to overstate the case. The initial translations were fragmented and awkward, and the sentence structures didn't always make sense. But the machine had uncovered a pattern, a foundation where previously there had only been chaos. One of the most significant breakthroughs came when the researchers attempted to interpret the first line of the manuscript. After applying minor spelling corrections and testing with Google Translate, the sentence reportedly read, "She made recommendations to the priest, man of the house, and me and people." While awkward, the sentence contains clear grammatical roles and resembles human speech. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was the first plausible sentence ever extracted from the text. This discovery suggested that the manuscript may have been written in a coded or transformed form of Hebrew, perhaps using techniques like anagramming or letter substitution, making it especially difficult for human eyes to parse. What set this attempt apart wasn't just the language match, it was the methodology. Unlike past efforts driven by intuition, AI tackled the manuscript through cold, calculated pattern recognition. The system had no preconceived notions, no pet theories, no emotional investment. It simply followed the data. While this doesn't mean the manuscript is now fully readable, it does mean a meaningful breakthrough has been made. The Voynich Manuscript has finally begun to respond, not to centuries of speculation, but to a machine that speaks the universal language of probability. Whether this is the beginning of a full translation or just another misleading pattern is still unknown. Anagrams, alphagrams, and algorithms. One of the most intriguing elements in the AI-led decoding of the Voynich Manuscript is the possible use of alphagrams, a technique where the letters in a word are alphabetized. This form of transformation doesn't create random gibberish, but hides familiar words in plain sight by rearranging their letters. If the original author employed this method intentionally, it would have served as a simple yet effective cipher to throw off any untrained reader. For decades, human researchers overlooked this possibility or dismissed it as unlikely. But for a machine trained to process billions of permutations, alphagrams are just another pattern to test. AI was able to use this method in combination with known linguistic structures to analyze the manuscript's early pages. Specifically, researchers at the University of Alberta focused on the first 10 pages and applied algorithmic processing that unscrambled these letter arrangements based on frequency, syntax, and contextual modeling. The result? A surprisingly high percentage of words matched entries in Hebrew dictionaries. These weren't just stray coincidences. The consistency was strong enough to suggest that someone had gone to great lengths to encode Hebrew phrases using alphabetized or otherwise scrambled structures, likely to disguise the base language. A compelling example of this came in the form of a tentative translation of the manuscript's first line. After resolving the anagram-like construction and applying some minor spelling corrections, the resulting sentence, once processed through Google Translate, read, "She made recommendations to the priest, man of the house, and me, and people." While not grammatically perfect, it had recognizable structure and meaning, something no previous translation attempt had ever achieved. This was a major leap forward, not because it was a flawless translation, but because it proved the manuscript might be using more than just unknown script. It could be masking familiar words in heavily altered forms. Importantly, the use of alphagrams and anagram-like wordplay would explain why human experts, even seasoned codebreakers, failed to make progress. These techniques create ambiguity that humans often dismiss as noise, but which machines can scan systematically. AID's success here wasn't in cracking a code in the traditional sense, but in recognizing a logic system built to confuse. Whether these patterns continue across the entire manuscript remains to be seen. But one thing is clear: the Voynich Manuscript may have been readable all along, just written in a language rearranged and obscured in ways that only a machine could patiently untangle. Just when algorithms seem to be pulling back the curtain, another layer, hidden in plain sight, started to emerge from the pages themselves. From multispectral scans to human hands. In 2024, a different kind of breakthrough emerged, not through code breaking or language analysis, but through imaging technology. A team of researchers, led by medieval manuscript expert Lisa Fagan Davis, began re-examining multispectral scans of the Voynich manuscript that had been taken years earlier but never fully explored. Multispectral imaging allows scholars to view a document under various wavelengths of light, revealing hidden details, erased markings, and text invisible to the naked eye. This technology had already transformed the study of other ancient texts, but its application to the Voynich had gone underutilized until now. When Davis and her team revisited scans from 10 specific pages, they found something remarkable. Faint marginal annotations written in Roman script, likely added by someone who had attempted to decode the manuscript in the 17th century. These notations weren't decorative or random. They were clearly deliberate attempts to match Voynichese characters to Latin or another known language. The handwriting, ink, and context strongly pointed to Johannes Marcus Marci, a 17th-century Prague physician who once owned the manuscript. Marci had previously sent the book to Jesuit scholar Athanasius Kircher in a well-documented attempt to have it deciphered. But this discovery suggested Marci may have tried to crack it himself first. This finding added an important dimension to the Voynich debate, that the manuscript was being seriously studied by early scholars who clearly believed it held meaning. The annotations suggested an active effort to decode, rather than dismiss or fake, the text. In fact, Some of the marginal notes appeared to directly map Voynich's symbols to Latin equivalents, essentially an early hand-drawn key. Though incomplete, these markings provided supporting evidence that the text followed a structure, and that earlier generations had gotten closer than we realized. The discovery helped shift the conversation away from hoax theories and toward serious re-examination of the manuscript's content and purpose. Equally significant were traces of corrections and revisions within the manuscript itself, also revealed through multispectral imaging. These included overwritten characters and signs of erased words, clear indicators that the original author made mistakes and actively edited the work. This level of detail argued against the idea of a meaningless hoax. Why would someone revise nonsense so carefully? The evidence painted a picture of a living document, written, studied, and amended by real people over time. Combined with AI findings, the imaging data helped confirm what many had long suspected. The Voynich Manuscript was never just gibberish. It was a layered, encrypted work that someone once genuinely tried to understand. Hebrew, Latin, or both? As artificial intelligence began revealing patterns in the Voynich Manuscript, one major debate quickly emerged. What language is actually at the manuscript's core? The University of Alberta's AI-driven analysis strongly pointed to Hebrew. More than 80% of the deciphered words in the early pages appeared in Hebrew dictionaries, lending weight to the theory that the manuscript's base language is a ciphered form of Hebrew. This finding gained traction as algorithms repeatedly matched Voynich's words to Hebrew roots, especially when factoring in anagramming and letter reordering techniques. However, not all scholars are convinced that Hebrew is the full answer or even the right one. Adding complexity to the debate are recent findings from multispectral scans of the manuscript, which revealed marginalia and hidden notes written in Latin script. These annotations, likely made by 17th-century owner Johannes Marcus Marzi, attempted to align Voynich characters with Latin equivalents. The implication here is that early readers thought Latin was the key, or that they themselves were writing in Latin to interpret or decode the text. This has led many scholars to consider the possibility that the manuscript may have more than one linguistic layer, a kind of dual encoding, where Hebrew might be the underlying language, but Latin was used as a reference or translation framework. This raises a deeper question. Could the Voynich Manuscript be a hybrid document composed by someone fluent in both Hebrew and Latin? In 15th-century Europe, especially in scholarly circles, that wouldn't have been unusual. Latin was the lingua franca of education and science, while Hebrew was studied by those involved in religious scholarship, medicine, or the occult. It's plausible that the author or authors employed a mixed language code to protect the information from both casual readers and religious authorities. Dual-coded systems, though rare, have been used in other historical manuscripts to compartmentalize knowledge or signal different levels of access. The debate remains unresolved, and that uncertainty has opened the door to competing theories. Some scholars lean toward a Hebrew foundation, bolstered by AI results and dictionary matches. Others argue that the visual structure, academic context, and marginalia make Latin the more likely base. A few suggest it could be neither, nor both, operating in tandem. What's clear is that language alone may not hold the entire answer. If the manuscript is indeed dual-coded, then decoding it will require more than just choosing a side. It may demand understanding a system where Hebrew and Latin interact, each revealing only part of a deeper, more guarded message. Why hide it? What was so dangerous? One of the more grounded but provocative theories about the Voynich Manuscript is that it may have been a women's health manual containing knowledge related to fertility, conception, menstruation, or even early forms of birth control. Some of this speculation stems from the biological section of the manuscript, which includes repeated imagery of nude women interacting with fluid-filled tubes and enclosed spaces. These illustrations, unusual for the time, have led researchers to consider whether the book held medical or anatomical content focused on female physiology. If true, this would place the manuscript in a very sensitive position within the context of 15th century Europe. At that time, topics involving female reproductive health were not only taboo, but often subject to intense scrutiny by religious institutions. The Catholic Church wielded significant influence over what kinds of knowledge were permissible and who was allowed to access or disseminate it. Any written work dealing with women's health, particularly if it included instructions or remedies outside of ecclesiastical approval, could be labeled as heretical, subversive, or even occult. Encoding such a manuscript may have been less about creating a puzzle and more about self-preservation. The author might have felt compelled to hide the content to avoid persecution, or worse. There's also the possibility that the manuscript was encrypted to protect the knowledge from being misused or misunderstood. If the information inside involved treatments, fertility aids, or non-religious views on reproduction, the creator may have seen encryption as a moral safeguard. This wasn't necessarily about hiding the truth forever, but about ensuring it was only accessed by those with the training or approval to read it responsibly. In that context, the manuscript could be viewed as a protective artifact, its secrets preserved for future generations thought to be more tolerant or better prepared. Still, the underlying question remains unsettling. Who was the knowledge being protected from? Was it the Church, whose control over education and science often suppressed unconventional ideas? Or could it have been the general public, meaning us, because the content was considered too dangerous or destabilizing? If the Voynich Manuscript is, in part, a medical guide concealed under layers of cryptography, that implies someone believed the information was both valuable and threatening. AI may now be unlocking that hidden knowledge, but the reasons it was hidden in the first place could carry consequences that we are only beginning to grasp. The darker implications of the translation. Some of the earliest AI-driven translations of the Voynich Manuscript have raised new, uncomfortable questions, not because they solve the mystery, but because of what they appear to be uncovering. Phrases interpreted so far hint at practices involving priests, recommendations, and what some believe may be ritual or spiritual language. Combined with strange imagery and the manuscript's pharmaceutical and biological themes, this has fueled theories that the book may document banned remedies, folk medicine, or even esoteric rituals. These aren't claims of magic or mysticism, but they do suggest knowledge that was meant to stay hidden, perhaps deliberately so. The AI has begun identifying recurring patterns that point to themes outside mainstream medieval science. References to concoctions, cycles, and ceremonial processes have led some researchers to suggest the manuscript could contain ritual instructions or prohibited healing methods. In the 15th century, remedies not sanctioned by church or court doctors were often deemed dangerous or heretical. If the book discusses fertility treatments, psychoactive herbs, or non-Christian healing rites, that could explain why it was encrypted so carefully. It may not have been heresy in the eyes of the author, but it certainly would have been in the eyes of their society. This introduces a moral dilemma. If the content was buried to keep it from reaching those who would misuse it, or to avoid persecution, should we be unlocking it now? Some researchers worry that decoding the manuscript without understanding its cultural context could lead to misinterpretation, sensationalism, or even attempts to reconstruct practices that were intentionally abandoned. AI has no moral compass. It processes data, finds patterns, and outputs results. But what happens when that process brings long-buried, potentially volatile knowledge into the public sphere? The darker implication is that the manuscript's encryption wasn't merely technical, it was protective. Someone may have gone to great lengths to keep this knowledge sealed, either to safeguard its power or to ensure it was used only by those deemed worthy. As AI progresses, we might uncover content that was never meant for modern eyes, material that carries cultural, religious, or ethical weight far beyond a simple translation. The Voynich Manuscript may not just be a puzzle. It might be a warning. And with AI closing in, the real question is no longer, can we decode it, but should we? As the manuscript edges closer to being understood, the real concern might no longer be what's hidden, but what happens once it's exposed. The next unsettling step. Despite recent breakthroughs, the Voynich Manuscript remains only partially understood. Artificial intelligence has uncovered structural patterns, linguistic links, and even tentative translations, but no one can yet claim a complete or consistent reading of the entire book. AI models continue to improve, and with each iteration, they get closer to mapping the manuscript's syntax and vocabulary. However, much of the text remains fragmented and contextually ambiguous. We don't yet know what percentage of the book these translated phrases represent, or whether they accurately reflect the author's intended meaning. That uncertainty is critical, especially given the sensitive nature of what some of the content may suggest. As AI refines its models, the potential for misinterpretation grows. An algorithm trained on modern language structures may generate false positives, recognizing meaning where there is none, or twisting partial patterns into misleading narratives. If early translations hint at topics like rituals, medicine, or forbidden knowledge, these interpretations could be amplified or distorted by those looking for sensational answers. The risk isn't just academic. Unverified conclusions, especially when repeated in popular media, could lead to misinformation, misattributed history, or even the dangerous revival of outdated medical practices. Without cultural context or human oversight, AI-generated results may do more harm than good. This leads to a sobering question. What if decoding the manuscript brings consequences we're not prepared for? Not because it contains magic or curses, but because it may resurface ideas that were purposefully buried. Concepts about the body, the soul, or health that were once suppressed could now return without the checks that shaped them historically. And unlike the past, today's tools can disseminate these ideas rapidly. If AI opens a door to knowledge that was once hidden for social, moral, or theological reasons, what happens when that knowledge is reintroduced without those filters? We're entering unknown territory, not just technologically, but ethically. Ultimately, the power of AI to decode ancient texts comes with responsibility. The Voynich Manuscript is not just a linguistic challenge. It's a cultural artifact, layered with history, secrecy, and possibly intentional restraint. If AI reaches full translation, the result may be more than just clarity. It might bring confrontation with forgotten knowledge, content that was concealed not because it was useless, but because it was too disruptive. The final question isn't just whether we can solve the mystery, but what we do with the answer. What if, after centuries of silence, the manuscript finally speaks, and we wish it hadn't? If this unraveling mystery caught your attention, make sure to like the video, drop a comment with your theory, and subscribe for more deep dives like this. Don't forget to click the next video on your screen because the story doesn't end here.